All right, click the links to join the channel here over at Subscribestar. I got a mailbox. By all means, mail me some comics, but I mean, honestly, none of the new woke stuff unless you want me to make fun of it online, which I guess I would probably do. So the cancel pigs come from Mark Millar, Glenn O'Leary, who's the comic book guy who owns this, comic shop guy, and EVS. And it's a fantastic interview. It's less than a half hour, and you can see it on Mark Millar's channel. But right up front, I have to assume it's too little too late. I'm no expert in the industry these guys are. I look at comics every now and then. I pick them up, I read them, and they're really gay. And I mean that literally, like sodomy and musical theater. And to be honest, I mean it in the figurative sense also, but I don't know if I can say that on YouTube. Maybe it's safer to say lame or to paint a picture for you. Comics are for soy boys who are themselves mostly literally BLT also. And we're going to use this guy here as an example. Or even if the comics aren't literally focused on gay issues, which, nothing, I don't mean that a pejorative. I mean it as in terms of marketing, you're selling to a very limited audience when you're selling gay comics. That should be obvious to anyone. There's a small audience. The numbers, there's this perception that it's popular now, it's in vogue now to be like, oh, well, half of kids are BLT or something. They identify as all this kind of stuff. No, they don't. They're just saying that online, but when it comes time to buy the Mags of Saji or the Joe Glass stuff, it doesn't sell because they're just saying that to be cool on social media. It's like when my generation was riding motorcycles, it was just you saw someone do it, you're like, oh, that looks kind of cool, and you do it for a few years, and it's like, yeah, it is legitimately cool, though I wouldn't be riding today, maybe a dirt bike or something, but that's what it is. It's just kind of a social contagion thing. It's like people, why do you think jeans jackets were a thing? It's like, what a horrible idea for a piece of fabric. It's cotton. It's like, as soon as it gets wet, it's like, that's why the wool and polyester are out there. Anyway, the thing is, even if comics aren't literally focused on gay issues, they push too much girl power or diversity, and I'll explain all that in a minute. This guy's actually a really good example because there's a lot of people out there like here. And the thing is, this stuff isn't fixable. That's why it's too little too late. The difference is irreconcilable between the two audiences for comics or the spectrum. The problem is a schism in worldview. It's this huge separation between the left and the right, or if you want to call it globalist versus nationalist worldview. And unfortunately, there's no way to improve the writing in the mainstream because the left and the right have got too far away from each other. People say they just want to read good comics and tell me a good story. The problem is the left and the right have very different opinions on that nowadays. It's not just trying to balance politics and comics, which are obviously all left-wing. The gay Superman image, Superboy, where he's marching with a global warming poster boy with a poster board with his boyfriend who's got like purple hair or something like this. There's no equivalent where you show some group that is off limits committing horrific malamensea acts or something along those lines. The left-wing people can't write something on the right. They're just incapable of doing it. So here's the thing. The gay Superboy carrying a weather sign shouldn't be in a comic at all. First of all, because it causes a political division, and second of all, because the science is all over the map on it. And I know that the people who wrote that comic don't understand the science because I don't think they ever studied the science. If you want a scene like that in the comic, you have the science read something like "No" on Project X. Just some nonsense thing. It keeps it vague and non-political. That should be obvious to any writer or anyone who just a reader. It's like I'm not an expert in anything. It's like, yeah, that's just how you write scenes. It's just super vague. They're protesting something. You want a crowd scene, but it's just scribbles in the background. It doesn't have to actually say anything. That's how you take the middle of the spectrum. Oh, well, but middle of the spectrum, trying to be fair and impartial both sides is literally Hugo Boss. That's how they think of things. They don't believe there are two sides. Like that Rachel Leishman article about South Park from the Mary Sue was fantastic because she literally came out and says, but there are no two sides to every story. And you look at her like, you're a crazy person. How do you live in this world? Anyway, Comics would sell better if they were neutral, but the mainstream writers literally can't bring themselves to be neutral. That's why I say this issue cannot be fixed. The people who could save comics are the people in Comicsgate, the EVSs, Mike Millers. Anyone in CG would be a better writer than the far left people in comics now, because people like the Comicsgate people are closer politically to comic writers pre-1990s, when, in my opinion, comics were at their peak, and probably objectively true, because I think the sales were probably at their peak in the 80s and 90s, and the saturation in the market. The Comicsgate people would be better writers than the crazy people writing them now, who a lot of them are open about their mental illness. It's not just me using it hyperbolically. Of course, the mainstream is not going to hire right-wing writers, even those as milquetoast as, the Doug TenNapel or EVS, Mike Miller, whoever. So it's a done deal with comics. The ship has sailed. And nobody likes to say that because, we all enjoy comics, but you can just go pick up comics nowadays and go, yeah, you're not going to turn this thing around. So social media played a part in killing the industry, because as I'm reading the vocal, outraged people, most of them are mentally ill. Well, one of the most outspoken, it was that, is this guy who, if you click on his profile, and don't go harass him or anything like that, is a 48-year-old, pronouns in bio, a brony who thinks both the guys in the interview are toxic because they're talking about comics and it wasn't in accord with his worldview. It's people like this who are the most outspoken about wanting gay, diverse comics. A 50-year-old man who likes My Little Pony, which is a kid's toy from decades ago. And don't get me wrong, there's nothing wrong with, liking your hobbies, whatever you like, no problems there. I mean, the thing is, the guy doesn't have kids, so he's not going to pass on his hobby of the comics he likes to the next generation, which is very necessary for something comics which require physical infrastructure and a continuity. And two, a guy like this lives on Twitter, so he makes his presence seem like an overrepresentation of the comics customer. A 50-year-old childless gay man who likes My Little Pony are not representatives of your average customer, and if they were, then your industry will probably die in a few years when this customer passes, because he never passed it on to his kids. But left-wing people are 1,000 times more vocal on social media, because social media is set up for left-wing bias, and human psychology plays a part also. So how it works is left-wing people will mass report the right-wing accounts, and since the platforms themselves are run by left-wingers, the right-wing people end up getting banned. So the right-wing views, and even the middle of the political bell curve kind of views, their views don't get represented, and in the future they just learn to self-censor. So the comics and movie industry are reading social media, which has a selection bias to the left, which is an understatement, and they get a false view of what the customer wants. And I, in my tinfoil hat and Hugo Boss, represent millions of people, and people like me just get kicked off various platforms when I say diversity is cancer and vagina power and gay themes just don't sell. Now, admittedly, I'm saying things in a little bit over-the-top manner for some humor, but it doesn't change that the core of what I said is true. Diverse entertainment does not sell as well as if you had a bunch of, old school characters of blonde-haired, blue-eyed classical heroes with I remember the Spider-Man where, not Gwen Stacy, Mary Jane with the red hair, right? And she's posed in a doorway, I think. I think she's wearing a black shirt, and her hip is cocked out, and she goes, "Face it, Tiger, you hit the jackpot." I mean, everyone remembers that scene. If you're in Spider-Man, which was when I was a kid, was one of the best. Spider-Man, Daredevil, and Iron Man, fantastic. Those are all the same character. Yeah, all right, fair enough. I guess I like my comics simple. Everyone remembers that kind of comic with Gwen Stacy, blonde-haired character and the red-haired character. God, what a great run comics Spider-Man had. So I'm thinking of the issues where he takes off his mask and he shows the sick kid, and it's like, what a tearjerker that was. Anyway, the thing is, just saying the reality of what sells, what connects to an audience is just really offensive to these people. They don't know how to deal with it. The gay, diverse, anti-white, anti-Christian, anti-national type of stuff, you loosely call that stuff globalist or woke. You can't say the word woke to these people because they'll just lose their mind. They'll block you. They can't deal with you if they hear the woke word. It's a trigger word for them, and a lot of these people are they're in adult bodies, but they have childlike brains. So the thing is, all this global stuff just doesn't sell as well as more balanced comics. And when I say stuff like this, it's not even worth saying it on Twitter because they just mass report my account and it would get me banned. I'd lose another account. Or if I said it in their replies, they just block me. So I don't bother to comment. I just self-censor. So opinions like mine don't get out there. And the Twitter kids don't seem to understand business 101. They'd scroll through my Twitter history or someone like me, they'd see all the offensive posts, and there are many because that's the point of Twitter. And in their mind, they just discount every opinion on comics because I, in their minds, am a toxic Chad, whatever. But none of that matters, or that this guy's a furry, brony, whatever. Nothing matters but if you'll spend the $4 on the comic. That really is the bottom line, the only thing that matters in business. They don't understand this, and we do. I don't care if he's a brony communist or a furry Nazi. All I'm focused on is getting him a product that he'll pay for and is so good that he'll tell his commie Nazi friends and they'll come back and buy the next story. I don't care if you're dressed up as a furry as long as you have money in your hand. That's all I care about. Did you enjoy the story and will you buy the sequel? I don't care your politics, your sexuality, or your racial identity or whatever. Why would I? But it's different for them. They have this straw man view of the right wing, and a lot of them have mental illness. And it's not just me saying this, they will tell you in their bios, so they don't get dark humor or sarcasm or the, I don't give a F attitude, poop posts. The whole point of social media is being that kind of thing. A lot of these people don't know how to not take things seriously. They have these binary triggers for them where if you set it off by crossing the line with an epithet used humorously, well, their brain will shut down. A simple one-word, hot word trigger can make them incapable of all rational thought. But they don't understand that many customers are going to hold views and say things that they disagree with. Michael Jordan said Republicans buy tennis shoes too. They cannot deal with that. They think people like Sargon of Akkad or EVS are basically the Austrian corporal. Then we ask them, like, well, how do you deal with someone who's legitimately on the right? Like this guy, Thomas Sewell, who's an actual legitimate right-wing guy. He's an Australian activist, some kind of nationalist or something. He just got his Twitter account back. They don't know how to respond to something like that because they call everyone to the right of Sargon literally Hugo Boss, so they don't know how to deal with like someone who's actually on the right wing. And then people like Sargon or like the comics people that go, oh well, they're basically crypto fashionable. So think what they've done in their worldview, and they do this all the time. It's like if you're not a globalist like them. I mean, it's that 4-panel meme of the political compass test where it's this tiny little part where they're far left wing, authoritarian globalists, and everyone else is some kind of, nationalist Hugo Boss. It never occurs to them that they might have mental health issues. So they want to cancel Mark Millar because he talked to EVS, a comic book artist who in their minds is as far right as someone from World War II. And when you ask them to explain their position, it gets kind of vague and deals with Comicsgate. And you ask about Comicsgate, and it gets vague. And because it was a couple of years ago, they can't really point to anything. It's just something to do with diversity in comics. And Richard Meyer and Mags was in there somehow, and something about him not liking soy comics. And in their minds, all these Comicsgate guys are all, of course, European people, which they hate, and worse, they're Europeans who don't hate themselves or their tribe, and that's inconceivable to them because that's what's in vogue right now. They have this all or nothing thinking. If you don't use your imaginary silly pronouns, for example, just one thing, then they can't engage with you because they have to pretend to take the whole pronoun nonsense seriously. And obviously it's nonsense. It's just a fad, kids. Or global warming, which I promise you they don't understand the physics of. Or the mitigation treatment for the Wu flu, which I didn't take, of course. I stayed pure, and most of you also stayed pure. But if you took it, I don't give a shit. I don't care if you're a furry, brawny, commie, Nazi, otherkin, two-spirit. But to them, if you have one little thing that's out of accord with their checklist of worldviews, then you're in their bad category and you're not even human. But they're way overrepresented on social media. These people live on Twitter and Facebook and Instagram. They have parasocial relationships with the SJW comic people. The other guy losing his mind over EVS and Mark is this gay Latin guy who refers to them as old white men several times throughout his post. You can see he's just some anti-white racist, just completely mentally ill. Anyway, to the other SJWs in the industry, he's gay and vaguely Latin, so he can't just be called a nut job. He's on the oppression hierarchy, so he has to be treated with kid gloves instead of the lunatic he is. And that's the problem with I mean, that's the problem with a lot of things where we are nowadays, is treating people with kid gloves. Because if you just call them lunatics, then they'll try to cancel you. It's like, but clearly, sir, you are a lunatic. I've scrolled through your Twitter. But these are examples of outspoken, crazy people online. The gay Latin and the gay brony furry guy. And there's nothing wrong with any of that. I don't care, which is the point. I'm simply treating them equally. They're total idiots. It's not a big deal. I wish them well in their endeavors. I mean, I don't hate them. Most of us don't hate them because they're obviously crazy people. They can't help who they are. But there's this kind of fake social media world that has an overrepresented voice. And they're these toxic left-wing pussies. But the more important issue is that they're who's overrepresented and who's underrepresented when it comes time to actually buy the comic. Where if you have this small group who's, these far left, nut jobs who are overrepresented in terms of their voice, but they're underrepresented when it comes time to actually buying the comics. So their opinion doesn't matter because their oppression points of being gay, Latin, furry, brony, mentally ill, it's irrelevant in the business environment where you're simply trying to sell a $4 comic. And the SJWs in the mainstream don't seem to understand this, and it's one of the reasons they kill comics, and I think they did. It's over, at least the mainstream independent stuff to me seems to be over. I mean, you can dip in online and you can find the stuff just to kind of wet your beak and see where comics are, and you tell me if you think they can turn that ship around. I don't see any way possible under this. You'd have to fire everyone in the mainstream who's in charge of creative decisions and editing, that kind of thing. Clearly, that's not going to happen because even the holding companies, the Disney and who owns DC? Is it Warner Brothers or something? They're far left wing woke companies also, so nothing's going to change. It's like it had its run. Comics was fun. I don't know when it kind of really kicked into gear. I'd say post World War II. You started getting just the fantastic stuff. I mean, even before then, even in the 30s, right? During World War II. And then, I seem to peak 60s, 70s, in my opinion, was the peak. And it's like, that was a long time ago. I know a lot of people like the 80s and 90s stuff. I thought, 80s maybe. But honestly, I look at the 70s stuff and think, I would probably say the peak was probably about 70. Well, that was a long time ago. And then you look at stuff that's more recent, and it's like, there's nothing you'd pass on to your kids. And that's the critical issue, is passing it on to your kids and the next generation, and there's just nothing there. I mean, it ran its course. It's something like live play performances. At one time, that was how most people got their entertainment. Was small towns would have these play. A couple people would come and they do bits from Shakespeare and just abbreviated scenes, and that was how you got your entertainment and your education. And then you got moving pictures, you got radio, and then you got moving pictures, and then you got the talkies, and it's like things change and progress, and comics is just one of those things. It's going to go to an indie Comicsgate type of model, and Left Wing has got their independent projects as well, but it's like this whole Marvel, DC, Image, Dark Knight, whatever else out there. What's the other one that just Valiant just got bought up by somebody else? So like, that's just kind of the brick and mortar infrastructure associated with comics, and going to a store as a kid and having a big comics rack and like a regular bookstore. It's like that's just going to kind of fade out because you just can't have where everyone in the industry is so far left wing nut job woke, and they just can't write something that appeals to both sides because one side believes the other side is literally Hugo Boss, Roman saluting, marching around. In boots and whatnot. It's just they just have this straw man vision of the world, and a lot of that was due to Trump 2016 and the mental illness that had happened because of him, and is probably going to happen again in next year. Anyway, like, comment, subscribe. Check out Mark Millar's YouTube channel, and you can watch that interview. It's a half hour. It's pretty interesting, pretty mild, nothing to get worked up about, but these people are just not playing with the full deck. Anyway, I'll see you guys on the next episode.